So thank you, Liz, and welcome to everyone. I have started the recording for this event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, our AARP New Hampshire webinar with the Creative Feast. My name is Frances Donahue, and I am your host today. I am also a volunteer with AARP New Hampshire. The recording for today's virtual event will be available in a few days at www.youtube.com/AARPNH1. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. We welcome your questions. My fellow volunteer, Mary Roberg, will address them periodically throughout this demonstration. She will also be putting in the link for the recording, the web address for Liz's recipes, and information on the cooking classes throughout this demonstration. Today, Liz will show us how to make a delicious fruit pie. This recipe can be found at Cook-Along classes, Liz Barber's Creative Feast, thecreativefeast.com. This event is part of a series with the Creative Feast, which focuses on food and its impact on healthy living. AARP has been promoting the health and well-being of older Americans for over 60 years. In New Hampshire, AARP's work to bring you informative, innovative, and fun virtual events like today's online cook-along demonstration as a means of connection and inclusion. AARP has numerous free healthy living resources on its website, which include staying fit, wellness, and longevity, and information on healthy eating, as well as staying sharp. There is something for everyone. Chef Liz built her cooking career in various Boston catering and restaurant venues. After starting her family, she re-entered the workforce as the food world as a cooking instructor and developed Liz Barber's Creative Feast. Chef Liz has appeared on New Hampshire's WMUR's Cook Corner. Her cooking demonstrations and recipes in herb gardens have been featured in various publications, including Where Women Cook, New Hampshire Magazine, the Nashua Telegraph, and the Hippo Press. All her programs focus on the premise that we are healthier when we cook at home. So we hope you enjoy Liz's program today. All right, Liz, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Frances, and welcome everybody. I'm thrilled to have you here in my kitchen studio in Hollis, New Hampshire, right in the historic village. I've been able to spend the day in the garden. It's been so rainy here in New Hampshire, so it's been a wonderful day so far. And then to be able to share one of my favorite classes with you is just a thrill. So I want to first, before we get started, I'm going to take you to my website. I know the ladies are going to provide a link for you, but I'll take you to the website so you can see the recipes for this class and other classes that we've done in the past and coming up. So let me just go over to my computer, and I'm gonna share with you that information. And so if you let me see if I can enlarge this a little bit. Whoops. Oh, that went away completely. Let me try one more time and see, where are we? Sorry about that. That's not what I want. It's so funny because as I'm doing this, one of my neighbors just pulled into my driveway, and I know she's dropping off a whole bunch of plants for me. We've been sharing plants, so she distracted me for just a second. So let's go ahead and get this back up there and share that with you. There we go. Perfect, give you a full screen. Okay, so this is thecreativefeast.com. And if you go here, there's lots for you to explore, mostly in the fun and food section. Go right to the recipe blog. And then off to the right, you'll see that I have, for the past few years, been keeping all of these recipes here for you for classes that we've done in the past, and also for this season. And then you're just going to scroll down, and you'll come down to where it says for the best fruit pie. And this is our recipe for today. You can look ahead next month to our Italian trattoria. So that will be also another fun class. But if you go back up to the top, you can scroll down if any of you are at all interested in intermittent fasting. It's something I've been doing now for about 8 to 9 years. You can also find some low carb information here. If you'd like to look at my chickens, you can. And of course, my edible gardens, you can check those out. All these pictures of my home here in Hollis and my gardens. And then finally down to my kitchen remodel, so you can see how the studio came to be. So all of that information is there on my website, along with the recipe. But I do want to get us started. Let me just come back here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I just wanted to show you this pie. So it is the perfect season here for strawberry rhubarb. I do grow my own rhubarb. My strawberries are not yet out. They'll be out probably middle to late June in the area. So I do have store-bought strawberries. But this is a strawberry rhubarb pie that I made last night. And you can see that I did a lattice here. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But what's really fun is that this recipe actually comes from one of my favorite books called Pie Camp. And it's written by Kate McDermott. And I always recommend during my classes to go ahead and purchase this book to have in your own cookbook library, because you will find her recipes are very easy, they're delicious, and she takes you step by step. So for example, for this lattice pie, she shows you everything on how to do your crimping, all of that, and then how to do the lattice work, how to roll out a regular pie dough. She does a gluten-free pie dough. And then this is what I kind of followed for a lot of fun on how to make a really interesting lattice, which is what I did with mine. And so I am going to take that, and when we go to put the pie together, I'm going to show you how to do the lattice. And it's very easy. And then of course, I'm going to pop my pie into the oven, but I'll cut into this so I can show it to you what it looks like on the plate at the end of class. Excuse me. But the first thing we need to do is we need to get our pie dough ready. And I find honestly that this is one of the steps, the first step that keeps people from making pies, because you may have made one in the past and it just never came out. Chances are you had the wrong recipe. I am a total fan of this recipe. I've been using this recipe for over 10 years. And I will use it for pies and tarts. But of course, if you want to get more different types of pie crust, Kate's book has, as I mentioned, the gluten-free and all, and she has more of a tart dough. But we're going to do her standard master recipe for a pie dough. And I promise you, if you follow the steps and have your ingredients just ready for you, you will have success. So let's first talk about we want to make sure that we do have the right pie pan. This happens to be a little bit larger. You can use glass, you can use metal. Let me just grab for you. I have my pie pans down here below. This is a classic 9-inch pie pan. They're harder to find. I got mine on Amazon. And the reason is these are the original size of what pie pans used to be. So it kind of is a comment on, where we've gone with desserts. More is better, bigger is better. So this little pie pan definitely fits inside my larger one, which tends to be more of a standard size. This is about 10 inches. And always measure your pie pan across the bottom when you're looking for what size it is, not across the top. And then, of course, the fluted side is going to have a measurement. A deeper dish will be closer to 2 inches deep. whereas this one is about 1 inch deep. So that's something to keep in mind. Having said all of that, I have made this pie very successfully in an 8-inch cast iron pan. So you don't have to get too caught up in it. The pie dough recipe that I'm going to give you is perfect for a larger, deeper pie. So you're going to be covered on all bases. If you have the 9-inch pie pan, when you have extra dough, what do you do with it? Oh my goodness, I just stick it into my freezer. And when I have enough of these little balls of extra pie dough, I thaw them out in the refrigerator, roll them out, cover them with butter and cinnamon and sugar, and then I roll them up into little like arugulas, and then stick them into the oven and cook them. So you never want to throw away your extra pie dough. But anyway, so I wanted to show you my pie pan. Now we're going to be working with our pie dough, as I mentioned. This pie dough recipe, actually, you can make it, let it sit in the refrigerator for half hour to an hour, and then you can go ahead and roll it out and start filling your pie and then baking it right away. The only reason you need to stick it back into the refrigerator is you want to re-chill that butter. So currently, like I'm showing you, this is my butter that I'm using, an unsalted butter. But you don't want to take it out of the refrigerator until the very last minute, until it's ready to go in to your pie dough. Now, why is that? Well, when we make this pie dough, what you're going to discover is that you actually will see chunks of the butter in the dough, and that is perfect. We need that butter to stay cold and to stay in pieces. And I'm going to show you how to make sure that that happens. But the question is why do I want to do that? Well, what we're looking for is a flaky pie crust, more like a pastry like you'd find in a French patisserie. Or you can think of it almost like a puff pastry. You know how it has layers. When you cut into it, you can see the layers after it's been cooked, and it's light and flaky. That's what we're looking for. The way that you're going to get that is to make sure that your butter is cold when this goes into the oven, because as that pie crust hits that hot heat for the first 15 minutes, it sets up uh, the pie crust sets up, but also that's when the butter begins to melt. When the butter in the recipe in the dough begins to melt, if it's set up properly, that melting butter will then leave little airy pockets in the dough, in the crust, that will then turn into this flaky pie dough. So of all the lessons you have to learn about making a flaky pie crust, it's that all of your ingredients, even if you go all the way to making sure your flour is cold, everything needs to be cold as it's going into the oven. And I'm talking about the pie crust, not necessarily the filling, okay? So what I'm going to do is, we do have flour, and I've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, okay? And then I have a little bit of sugar that is totally optional, a little bit of salt. That's a good idea because it helps give you a little bit of a contrast. It brings out the flavors. Of course, we have 8 ounces of unsalted butter because I'm adding some salt in. Do make sure it's cold. And when I'm making a pastry, I splurge and I try to buy a grass-fed butter. You'll see that in the supermarket. A really good high quality butter, because you will taste the difference. Now, I've got a nice big measuring cup, and what I'm going to do, I'm just stepping off camera so that I can go ahead and get some ice cubes, and I'm going to put some water in with my ice cubes. And what that's going to do is, the water that we're adding now to the recipe is going to be ice water. okay, ice cold. So I'm going to let that sit there and get super cold, even though I've got nice cold water here. I want to make sure that it's as cold as possible. Okay, so let's get started with this. We've got our 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm going to add in my little bit of sugar. Again, that's totally optional. Oftentimes, if I know that I may make a savory pie later, a couple months later, I won't add the sugar to the pie dough. And why do I say several months later? Because you can freeze this pie dough for months and months. And then when you have a pie you need, you take that dough out of the freezer, put it into your refrigerator to thaw, and then you've got the perfect pie dough ready for you at any time. I've even found this pie dough buried in my freezer that I know is more than a year old, baked it up, and it was absolutely perfect. So I've got a little bit of salt in here. Ladies, if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt me.
Well, I actually do have a couple of questions. One
Okay.
question is in the Pie Camp book, do you know if they have the adjustments for high altitude?
That I don't know, but I would not be surprised if she brought that up. Kate really covers all the bases. She actually lives in Washington State. So I would imagine that she's got some of that covered depending on where her home is. So I would definitely look into that. And then they can give you those adjustments.
And can you use salted butter in your
You
recipes?
can, just don't put the salt don't add any extra salt. Okay. So you can do that. I have done it many, many times. So, don't worry about that. There's going to be plenty of sugar in the filling as well. Okay.
Do you freeze it rolled out or in a ball?
If you wanted to freeze it rolled out, you can. Just make sure that you wrap it well. What you don't want to have happen is to have freezer burn. So that's a good
Okay.
question. Yeah.
And how long do you defrost your frozen pie dough in the refrigerator?
Oh, good question. Until it's defrosted. I mean, I just put it in overnight. But actually, I do like that question because it leads me to another question. How long can I leave my dough in the refrigerator for? Right? Sometimes you're like, oh, I'm going to bake a pie. You make your dough, you put it in the fridge, and then that day you're like, oh, I couldn't bake the pie. And then 2 days later, you still haven't baked the pie. But if you look at your dough, you'll notice that it's changed color. It's almost a little gray. Don't let that dissuade you. So, for 3 days in the refrigerator, you can still bake that pie. It's going to be fine. But I wouldn't leave it in the refrigerator longer than 3 days. Just make sure it's in an airtight container.
Do,
Okay.
do you need to
Mm.
sift your flour before you
Nope.
use it?
Nope. Nope. No, don't do that. Um, I have rarely used a recipe other than like a chiffon cake or something like that where I've sifted the flour. So don't worry about that. This is a super easy, no fuss. So what you see here is I've just taken a whisk and I'm just stirring those dry ingredients, the sugar, the salt, and the flour together, and that's it.
And one last quick question. Do you ever use part shortening? Because some people say they get better results because all butter sometimes makes it crispy instead of flaky.
That is entirely up to you. I am not a shortening person. I prefer to use um, all natural, as less processed ingredients. But I do know that there are far better bakers than I who really like to have that difference. What I would ask you is to consider, instead of using shortening like Crisco, is find yourself real, it's called leaf lard. So it's lard, but it's much more pure, and you can get that online. Some stores hold it, carry it. But I would say go back to lard. Crisco oil was made to look like lard, and it really changed the way people eat. but crystal oil is the byproduct of a petroleum oil, from way back when, and they needed to use up this extra byproducts. So somebody had the great idea of making it so you could whip it up and make it and sell it to home cooks as a cheap alternative to butter and to lard. So I'm just, with caution, and with all the best of intentions, suggest that you move away from that manufactured ingredient and go to real lard. Okay. All right, let me just move just a little bit forward, and then we can take some questions in a few minutes. How's that? Okay, so we have mixed these in dry ingredients. Now, for my tools, when we cut in the butter, I have this wonderful pastry cutter. I used to use the one that was my grandmother's. It was very sentimental, but it was not sharp. And so it seemed to take forever for me to cut in my butter. So I went ahead and I bought a new one. So I think sometimes updating your tools every once in a while is really helpful. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Just make sure it's a good quality and it will hold up, with your pressing. But if you don't have one of those, and a lot of people use knives, I never liked that. I'll actually use my hands. Now, if you're going to use your hands to blend in your butter, you want to actually make sure your hands are cold, because our hands are are at our body's temperature, and they tend to be on the warm side. And like I said, we want all of our ingredients to be as cold as possible. So I am going to, for the sake of, let me do something for the person who doesn't have this extra tool. I'm going to show you how to do this. First, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse my hands under ice cold water in an attempt to get them as cold as possible. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my butter. And if you're using 2 sticks of butter, you can cut them, individually. And what I'm doing is just cutting thin slices. You can cut these in half if you want, whatever works for you. And I'm going to put those in. Now, while I'm cutting this, Frances, if there are any questions, go right ahead.
One question is what is your brand of butter?
So I just picked this up. It's called Plugra. It's a premium European style butter. But I have in the past used the Kerrygold. And if I can get a local butter, we do have some local dairies, so occasionally I'll put that in. I used to use, of course, the grocery store butter for years and years, and that was fine too. But what is the difference? One of the differences, the grass-fed, of course, but also the fact that these European style grass-fed butters have a higher percentage of fat, and that higher percentage of fat will help to give you that flakier, better tasting crust. So I do recommend you going for a high fat content. The higher, the better.
And they also want to know how you measure your butter.
Well,
not your butter, how
yep.
you measure your flour, excuse me. And also, do you weigh it versus how you measure it actually?
So this particular recipe is all by cup measure, and that's a really good question. So I do the dip and scoop. So you dip it in, you get a nice full cup, and then you take the back of your knife and run it across the top, and that's all you have to do. If you happen to have a scale and the recipe has been converted to grams, that is a more precise measurement. I don't think, I'm just trying to find in her book if I don't know that she uses the grams. She does add the grams. So that is for, just to be more precise. You can use that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut in my butter. I'm just pulling down my hands one more time. And then we'll go ahead and cut this in. So basically, you're going to get your hands in there and you're going to break this up, and you want to do this as quickly as possible. Now, how do I know when my butter is broken up to the right size? What we're looking for is we're looking for some pieces that are the size of almonds, some that are the size of the nail on your pinky finger. What we're not looking for is on a different kind of a crust, more of a shortbread crust that's more like a cookie crust, is that you will often see, uh, break up the butter until it looks like sand, or very small peas. We're not looking for that. We're looking for odd shapes, odd sizes. Because again, we're looking to, when this is done and I roll this out, I'm going to show you, you're going to see actual pieces of butter in that dough. And that's what we want. That's when you know you've done it just right. So I'm just pinching this together and breaking these up. And then I'll show you when they're all done. This is great too, because it's really important to learn, what does the texture feel like? What does the butter feel like? What size, is in my hands? I always encourage people to touch their food. If you're unwilling to touch your food, why are you going to eat it? So, get right in there. You learn so much when you use your sense of touch. It's the same as smell and sight. They're so important to cooking. Okay. I'm looking at this and I'm feeling this is right. So when you look at this, all right, let me, what I want to do is, I want to get into a Zoom. So I'm just stepping off camera just because I'm playing with my computer so we can zoom in a little bit on this bowl. Okay, so when I take this, and I'm just getting rid of the flour so you can see all the different sizes of my butter pieces. That's what I'm looking for. For some, oh, gee, Liz, that looks really big, but I've got some small ones in there, all mixed in, very different sizes. That is exactly right. That's what you want to have. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to zoom back out, and I'll mix in my water. So we're going to use a half cup of water. So I've got my cup measure here, and we're going to measure this with, of course, we don't want the ice in there. Okay, up to a half cup. So now that water is super cold. Perfect. And then we're going to get ready to add that in. Now, how do you add it in? Certainly you could stir this with a fork. I really like this dough whisk because it keeps my hands out of there, again, which are going to be warm. So once I found that I had this great tool, that's what I started to use. A dough whip is probably about $12 online. They're easy, but it's a great tool. You'll find you use it more often than you thought. But of course, using a fork is fine. And if in the end, all you have is your hands, that's okay, because I will reach in here with my hands at one point. So I'm going to go ahead and add my ice cold water and then just start moving this around. The idea is that I want that ice cold water to begin to coat my flour. And the other thing about this dough that I want you to understand is it's not going to look like a perfect disc of dough. It's going to look a little bit shaggy, and that's okay. So because we're going to have all those bits of butter that are different sizes, but I will show you how to know how long do I mix this, okay? Because that is a big question for people, because you don't want to over mix the dough. You don't want to over handle the dough, because that will then make it chewy and you'll have melted the butter if you handle it too much. Okay, so we've gotten it that far, and now I'm going to reach in with my hand. And I'm just going to bring this together, move this around in the bowl. And how do I know if I have enough water? Well, as we're blending it, if I take a handful and I squeeze it and it holds together, then I know I know I have enough water. If for some reason you don't have, it doesn't do that, you can add more water, but just do it a teaspoon at a time. Don't do too much, okay? So now as I'm pushing this, blending this together, I'm kind of stretching and pushing to absorb that dry flour. And that's all I'm doing. Now, I still have a little bit of dry flour in the bottom. That's fine. I'm gonna put this right onto my work surface. Get rid of this bowl and bring it together. And all I'm trying to do is to get that extra flour, that dried flour, in there without overworking it. So you see, all I'm doing is squeezing it, really. Now, it's a little warm in the house today, so you may have a slightly different result. But the point is that you see how I've just brought that together and kind of gone around and, oh, I've got some dry bits here, bring them in, and then just squeeze this together. Now, the next step is going to be to put this into 2 discs, okay? Because this is a 2-crust recipe. If you're using only 1 crust, then the other one, like I said, can go right into your freezer. All right, so I've got it pretty round, but you can see again, it's kind of shaggy, not perfect. We're not looking for that, because if you try to get it to look perfect, like you envisioned it in a video or something like that, you're gonna overwork the dough. Any dough that you've bought at the grocery store, for example, that's pre-made and it's all smooth, that's not what we're doing. So don't pay attention to that. Trust the recipe. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this in half. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this because I want you to see, as I told you, you're going to see that butter. So you can see right there already that there are some chunks of butter here. Okay, I'm just trying to see where I am. Now, if I mush this a little bit, you can already see there's kind of layers in there. That's great. And then when I go to roll this out, you're going to see this in when I roll this dough out. So I just wanted to show you that. And now I'm just going to make this into a disc. Again, it's still a little bit shaggy. I don't want you to worry about that.
Liz, we have a
And
couple
then,
of questions.
sure.
Okay, so somebody said, could you use a KitchenAid mixer to blend your flour and butter together?
No. No, because that will overmix it and then you'll lose everything. The best thing I can tell you to do in that vein is if you have a food processor, you could do that. And then you're going to do it where you do a pulse, and you're only going to do it for like 12 pulses. It's going to be, bump, bump, bump 12 times. And that is going to break up the butter. If you do it more, you're going to break up the butter way too small. Okay. So I don't recommend that you ever use a mixer for this stage. Even with the dough hook, I'm just getting some flour. Go ahead.
And they said, could you use the pastry cutter even when you add the water instead of using the Danish whisk?
Sure. That's a really good, that's a good idea.
And have you noticed a difference between when you measure a cup and if you weigh it? Have you noticed a difference in either of the methods, or they come out about the same?
They come out about the same, but remember that I think if you want to be more precise, the measurements, the gram measurement is the way to go. Let me just show you. This is the little scale that I have that I use. So it converts to very, all the different measurements. So It's battery operated, it's light, inexpensive, but it is a great scale to have with you. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just stick these in the refrigerator, but again, you want to do this for about half an hour or so. If you're really anxious and you want to get baking, pretty soon, the flatter you make these, the more surface area is exposed in the refrigerator, the faster they'll cool down. You might be tempted to throw them in the freezer. You could do that if you'd like. It will just make this top a little bit dry, but it shouldn't be an issue. Just keep an eye on it because you don't want it to freeze if you're planning to use it right away. I'm going to pop this in the fridge and pull out the dough that I made last night so that I would have a nice cold dough. Okay. So here are the discs that I made last night, okay? And actually, I'm going to take a pause here. I think I will now do the filling, so that is ready. So I just wanted to show you these guys. They're nice and firm. They've been in the refrigerator, so they're going to be ready for me to use. So when I roll those out, you're going to see how I'm going to do that because I'm going to show you a great technique for that. So let's just take just a minute to mix our pie and filling ingredients together. Were there any questions, Francis, before I go ahead and do that?
There is, someone asked, do you cover your dough when you put it in the fridge?
If I'm just doing it for the half hour or the hour, I don't. But those sat overnight and I had them wrapped in plastic.
Okay. And is there any way before the end that you could show us how you use the pastry cutter, the butter cutter, so that I know it just kind of, I didn't get a chance to ask you while you were doing that.
Oh,
If it's too late, that's okay, but
yeah, I mean, I don't have enough ingredients to do that, but I can tell you that really all it is that you're putting it in and you're just doing this. And again, you can see how it breaks up the butter. And so you can see the sizes. It's super easy to use. I have gotten to prefer it over using my hands, to be quite honest. Again, because my hands are warm, they tend to make the butter melt a little bit quicker. Okay, so I'm using obviously the same bowl that I had the pie dough ingredients in. I'm going to be adding flour to this anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, so our ingredients are, we're going to use about, the recipe says, let me just go to the recipe to make sure that I am reading that correctly for you. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Okay. So the recipe calls for 5 to 6 cups of fresh or frozen fruit. So frozen fruit, can I use that? Yes, you can. And actually, that's what I used last night. I had purchased some frozen strawberries and I had frozen rhubarb. And so I wanted to use up that rhubarb. So I went ahead and I made my pie filling with the frozen rhubarb and the strawberries. Now, do not thaw your frozen fruit before you make the recipe because then that will draw out all of the water, all of the liquid from the frozen fruit, and your pie will not cook correctly. If you're using frozen fruit, you make the filling, put it into your crust frozen, and then stick it into your oven. It will take about 10 to 15 minutes longer to bake your pie using frozen fruit. Keep that in mind. But other than that, the flavor, everything comes out just fine. Key thing again, if using frozen fruit, do not thaw it before you bake your pie. Okay. Now I'm trying to think if there was any other advice so I touched on the idea that it will take longer. Now, how do you know that your pie filling is cooked all the way? This is where your vents are really important. And we'll touch on this again when I go to put this all together. But when your pie is baking and you're wondering, is it done? Is it done? If you look, take the pie out of the oven. If the filling is bubbling, really bubbling, then your pie is done. Because what we're doing is we're going to be adding our fruit, we're going to add some sugar, and we're going to add some kind of a thickener in there. That thickener, if you've ever made a sauce, a fruit sauce on the stove, you know that if you're adding a thickener, you've got to let that sauce, that fruit come to a boil in order for that thickener to react and to do its job. It's the same thing within your pie crust. That filling has to be hot enough that it comes to a boil, right? So you'll see it bubbling up, and if it's it's bubbling on the edges, but also bubbling in the middle, and the pie crust is nice and brown, then you should be just fine. So I just, again, keep that in mind, especially if you're using the frozen fruit, because you're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, I gave it an extra 10 minutes, but it's really not bubbling. Let it stay in there. Lower the temperature if you have to so it doesn't burn your crust, but let it stay in there until the filling is bubbling with your fruit pie. I'm not talking about a custard pie. We're talking about a berry or a fruit pie that you would use, that you would be adding a thickener to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and cut up my fruit. And feel free to ask any questions. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention is I grow my own, as you can see, my own rhubarb, and it's a beautiful red color. I love this rhubarb so much, and I wish my family loved it just as much as I did, because then I would have it all the time. But this is the bottom part that you pull out of the plant, and I just wash it up. I'm still going to use it. The leaves get put into the compost. Of course, you don't do anything with those leaves. Okay, so I'm going to cut these up into about 1-inch pieces, and I'm going to do about 5 cups, and then I'll do the last of the berries. And I'll be honest, I'm going to overfill this. I'm going to do a little bit more because I like a fruitier filling. So I've added just a little bit more sugar and probably about another 2 teaspoons of my thickener. Okay, Francis, any questions while I'm doing this?
So they had a question about fresh fruit. After you've washed it, does it need to be completely dry before you use it?
Not completely dry, but you don't want it dripping wet. So that's a good question. Any other questions?
Nope, it's not so far.
Okay. Again, this is where if you wanted to do it by weight, you can. Oh, I guess I'm going to come up short on the rhubarb, so I'm going to go heavier on the strawberries. Great adaptation to the recipe. I thought I had enough rhubarb picked, but I know I have more berries. So my total amount of fruit I'm going to go is about 6. Let's see, what do we have here? We have 5 to 6 cups. I'm going to go 6 to 7. Oh no, I have about 4 cups here. Good for me. This is 4 cups, so I'm going to add about 2 cups of berries to this. So that will go in there. And then these are my berries. Now, I'm not going to slice them too thin. They're big berries. I do want to leave a little bit to them. You can, I prefer like cutting them into quarters or heavier slices. So you can do that. So I'm going to go about 2 cups. So I've even cut this one in half. I'm not afraid. It's going to give off plenty of juice. Any other questions?
And of course, now we have several. So
Oh,
if you're
good.
using
Okay.
frozen fruit, and it should have some ice crystals on it, should you shake the ice crystals off first?
Sure. I mean, because those ice crystals are going to be liquid, although I'm curious if those ice crystals are there because the fruit ultimately gave off that water. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. But if they are freezer burned, you don't want to use them anyway.
And
As a,
so if you're doing a single pie crust, which you're not doing here, do you ever pre-bake the crust a bit?
you not, it depends on the pie. That's called blind baking. And for some pies, you will. So, for example, if you were going to make like a chocolate custard pie, right? And the custard you're going to make the custard on the stove and then pour it into the pie. And then you're not actually going to bake it, but you're going to refrigerate it and that custard will thicken up and you've got your pie crust underneath. Of course, that pie crust will be baked in advance. Now, that's a whole different technique. So for a blind baked pie crust, you're going to put that crust into your pan and shape it, and then you're going to line it with parchment paper and then put what they call baking weights in there. Oh, also, I like to kind of take a fork and just do some holes in the bottom. That will keep the pie crust from puffing up at all. But you put those weights in there on top of the paper. I've used dry beans, and you bake it. You want to fill the whole pie crust so that it weighs down the bottom and then allows the crust to cook, usually for about 10 to 20 minutes, depending on the recipe. Take it out, and then that baked pie crust is ready. I once attended a pie baking event, and um, the organization that was holding it that baked a bunch of pies, they partially pre-baked their crusts and then filled them. And then these were apple pies. That made no sense to me. A good dough recipe in a properly heated oven, you do not need to pre-bake it if you're making a filled pie, in my opinion. Okay.
Okay. You have another question. Why would their butter crust get hard?
I guess I'm not quite sure what that means.
I think
So
maybe a little tough and hard.
if you overhandled it, yeah, that will do it. That's why we were very careful that we did not over mix, right? That's like if you're making a quick bread and it says just add the wet ingredients until it's just blended and then you bake it. How much you blend something will have a positive or a negative outcome to um, your end result there.
And there's a question about rhubarb. A couple questions. Is there a
Okay.
best type to use? Because some people say theirs is never as red as yours. And after you grow it and you want to use it, how do you freeze it? Do you freeze it raw and cut, or
Yep.
exactly what do you
I
do?
Okay, so I got to be honest. I don't know what kind of rhubarb this is. It came with my house. It's the only plant that was living, really, on the property when we bought the house. And I was like, oh, I don't like rhubarb, and I threw it out in the back of the woods. And then the next year, it was still growing. And I'm like, okay, God put this plant here and wants it to grow, so I will plant it. And then all of a sudden, it came up this beautiful rhubarb. It doesn't flower, and I can harvest from it all year. And so then, of course, I started exploring recipes for rhubarb, and I loved it. Was there another question? I can't remember.
Nope, you answered them
Okay,
all.
okay. All right, so let me just take 1 second. In went my sugar. Now, this recipe is not specifically for rhubarb. Whenever I use rhubarb or cranberry, I add just a little bit more sugar, like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons more, because I know it's not as sweet. So I add just a little bit more sugar. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. And then here's like a little pinch of salt, add that in. And then the thickener. Okay, so this recipe calls for 2 to 3 teaspoons of cornstarch, which you can use, or flour, that's fine. Or it says, or what I've discovered is tapioca flour, which is just tapioca that's kind of blended to look like flour. I prefer that tapioca because it should have like a clear, it should run clear if you get some juices on the plate. But flour is just fine too. She doesn't overdo it, so it doesn't have that pasty, floury flavor. And of course, the cornstarch is great too and gives you a smooth finish. So I'm using my tapioca flour that I have. So a lot of recipes also, if you have quick cooking tapioca pearls, you can use that too. I just find that the tapioca flour doesn't leave any little beads behind. Everything dissolves beautifully. Okay. I see you've got some other questions there.
Exactly how did you freeze your rhubarb?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I just cut it and put it in a plastic bag. That's it. Because it's not wet, right? As long as it's not wet. If you wash your rhubarb first, which you should, make sure it's completely dry and then freeze it. And I don't freeze it on a tray. I just put it in a plastic bag and I freeze it. I do the same thing with blueberries. Because, and here's why, I'm not going to take out a few chunks of rhubarb and use them as a garnish, right? If I were going to make blueberry pancakes, for example, and I have frozen blueberries, I want my blueberries to be separated from each other, or strawberries. Then you would put them on a sheet pan, freeze them, take them frozen, put them in a plastic bag, and then you can scoop them out as you want. These I freeze according to my recipe. So I knew, typically I freeze them in 6-cup packages, and then I have them, and I always write 6 cups. So I know exactly how much is in there.
So when you added your cornstarch, you didn't need to make a little gel or anything first.
No, nope. Because remember, yes, because as we cook this filling, it's going to release the juices and it's going to bubble. And that is the boiling. That's the cooking part. That's a great question. I'm also going to add a little bit of lemon juice.
And somebody asked, if you're making an apple pie, do you need to cook the apples first?
I never do. And go onto my website where the recipes are. You will see on the side is, there's a whole thing about pie, different categories. Get the apple pie recipe. It's also Kate McDermott's. She doesn't even peel the apples. I never peel my apples anymore because a couple of reasons. Number one, when you cook your apple pie filling correctly, it will break down the skin. But also, apples, like cranberries and rhubarb, actually have pectin in them, and they will help to thicken your pie. So I never peel my apples. Good question.
And if you're using tapioca, do you use the same amount as you would for the word's escaping me?
Yeah.
Starch or flour?
Yes. Yeah. When I'm using the tapioca, yes, I do. But again, I prefer the tapioca flour, so I do recommend that. Okay, I've just added my lemon juice, and now I'm mixing this all so everything is beautifully coated. And then we're going to set this aside, and I'm going to bring out my dough. So before we do that, Frances, are there any other questions?
I do have one. So back to using some shortening. in with the butter. Does the shortening also need to be cold and refrigerated as well? When you were
Yes,
making
I'm
your
glad you caught that. Yes, everything should be cold. Everything should be cold. That was a good catch. Okay. This is one of my favorite tools. And I bought it a few years ago so that I could know how big to make my pie crust. Okay, because typically your recipe will say roll it out to 12 inches or so. So this one says, let's see, a 12-inch circle. So look, it's got my circle measurements right here, so I know how big to make it. Now I'm using a slightly larger pie pan. Remember, it's got those deeper sides. So I'm going to go out to about 13 inches to make sure I'm covered. Okay. I'm going to bring that out and I'm going to get a little bit of flour. Okay. And I'm just going to bring out one of my pie doughs that I made last night, because if I bring out both, then the second one is going to that butter is going to begin to warm up, and I don't want that. Now, I apologize. We're going to go a little bit over here, but I would love for you to stick it out. I know that AARP records this. So if you have to go, the rest of the lesson, of course, will be on the recording that will be sent to you. Okay, now we're going to roll this out. Kate McDermott recommends that you give this a good pounding. Try to, spread it out without overworking it. You don't have to do this, but I find that sometimes it alleviates a little stress you might be having. So I just give it a good whack to kind of flatten it out a little bit. I put a little bit of flour on the surface, and I'll put a little bit on the top of my dough, just a little bit, okay? And then I'm going to start to roll. And so you see how these edges are cracked? Don't worry about that. I'm going to go back into, see about if I can zoom this in just a little bit to help give you a better view of what's happening here. Okay. You know what? Let's just zoom out just a little bit. There we go. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and I roll from the center out and then towards me. And when I turn this, again, rolling from the center out, because then you want this dough to be even in the center, evenly thick in the center and on the edges. If you work just from the edges, then you'll have a thicker center, and then that will be super doughy when you go to eat. So we want to make sure that we're pushing from the center out to the edges. And then we'll worry about making the edges look pretty towards the end. Now, what I do want to do, I'm going to zoom right in there. I don't have to do it too far, and you can already see those pieces of butter, right? You see that one, you see those up here. When you're rolling out, you can see those pieces of butter in there. Everything is just as it should be. So I'm going to roll this out and I can take some questions.
Okay. Flour, when you were making your dough, does your flour need to be cold too?
Kate likes to have her flour cold. So I would say yes, but do I ever refrigerate my flour? I don't. I just don't have the space in my refrigerator, but some people do. So you can put it in there. It can be part of your prep, refrigerate it for a little while. Cold is always better.
And so do you need to keep your pie dough at least 30 minutes in the refrigerator, or can you take it out a little earlier?
Well, the longer you put it in there, the colder the butter will be. So that's what I would say to that. It's up to
Okay.
you. Yeah. I mean, look, I've even been in a super hurry and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to make this now. It just, it doesn't come out quite as flaky because again, the butter is a little bit on the warm side. But does it ruin the pie? No.
And tapioca, how long should we store it in the fridge?
No, it's not
How long
cooked
should we store
tapioca.
it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the expiration date on products like flour, tapioca, all of that, they give those to you as a guide. Flour can go rancid just because, you know, that's the nature of all different kinds of flours. Honestly, I don't know how long you can. I just used it. I know I've had that package for a little while. Actually, let me just show you. I left it out here so you can see this is the package that I use. It also happens to be gluten-free. And the expiration date is May 22nd. And it's still working. Okay. But you know, like yeast, that's an issue. You can test yeast to see you know, if it's still alive and working. Okay, so that's about all that I want to do. And if you're really persnickety, you can kind of even that out. But I'll tell you something, this is going to hang over the edge and you're going to end up rolling it up anyway. And then here's another thing about me. When I create a recipe for a pie or something like that, I always put the word rustic in front of it so that there's not any great expectation that it's going to be absolutely perfect. And I think that that is just such a more relaxed way to cook. So this is going to be a rustic strawberry rhubarb pie. All right. Now, let's get this into our pie pan. So how do we do that? I'm going to zoom back out. A couple ways you can do it. Number one, you could, with a little, notice I've used very little flour on this. You could go like this and like this, put that into so that the center is in the center part of your pan, and then unfold it. And now I know it's centered in the pan. Or you could do this. Take it, flip it over, put this into the center like that, and then just roll that out. Okay. Now I'm going to lift and drop and very carefully put this. Oh, I was just in the garden right before I saw you guys, and I think I left a little dirt under my nails. So don't be too picky about that. Anyway, so very gently push it into the inner corners. And if you just lift it up and drop it down, that will help you get in there. Don't push and weave. Now, what if you get a hole in here? Okay, take off a little piece of this, dab it with a little bit of water, which will act as glue, and you can fill that hole, you know, just push this right over your hole, make sure it's, you know, in nice and secure, and you shouldn't have any issues. All right. Now, here is our filling. Perfect. I'm going to set this aside in the refrigerator because again, we want to keep it cold. And I'm going to take out my second piece of dough and I'm going to cut my lattice. And we have to roll again. A little bit of flour. So Francis, while I'm rolling this, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take them. I'm going to roll this just like I did before.
Well, somebody wanted to know, they said their pie doesn't cook evenly on the bottom. What do they need to do to fix this?
Well, you need to check your oven. I would buy a oven thermometer that hangs in your oven to see if it's cooking evenly. I know we have ovens that cook in different sides of your oven. They cook, you know, might heat unevenly, so you may have to, you know, spin your pie around in the oven. Another thing is I'm trying to think, if typically your oven, if it's not cooking evenly, um, I cook this, I put my pie in the middle rack of the oven so that the air flows over and underneath. And so you can do that. If you're somebody who has a convection oven and you're doing convection bake, that will help to move that air under and over and all around. If you are using the convection bake, you want to keep an eye on your crust. Some people's convection bake really speeds up the cooking, so you want to keep an eye on that. I always use convection in my oven, but my oven is probably not going to be the same as yours, so you just want to keep that in mind. All right, I'm rolling this out to, I'm going to go again out to 13 inches. As evenly as possible. And notice sometimes I flip it over and I'm grabbing some of that flour. If you're doing this and you don't have one of these mats, on a regular countertop, that should be fine. I happen to have marble countertops, so that's really great for baking, making pastry doughs on. But just remember, your countertops can be a little on the warm side too, so keep that in mind. But there's no reason why you couldn't just roll this out directly on your counter. Just make sure you have the flour underneath.
So Liz,
Yep.
when you're baking it, your directions say 425. So if you're using a convection oven, do you drop it 25 degrees?
I have stuck with the 425 on my convection oven. But again, yours better than mine. Doesn't get super, outrageously hot, but that convection does help to move that warm air all the way around. So I would try it first at the 425, but notice too, after I think 15 or 20 minutes, it has you drop the temperature. Don't forget that temperature drop. That's really important because the high heat at the start is all about getting your pie dough set, and then the rest of the heat is to cook the filling, but also continue to do the pie crust. Now I'm going to go ahead and you can do the same size strips because I'm going to do a lattice. So I'm just going to go real simple, and I'm just going to make lattice strips that are about the same size. Always, I love having my ruler in my kitchen. I use it all the time. These could be thick, they could be thin. As you noticed, maybe I'll do a couple of fun ones. And I'll make a braid. So these will be a little bit on the thin side. A few of these, so we can throw one of these braids in there. There are some great decorative pie recipe books out there too, if you really want to get into it. You could use cookie cutters to cut out tiny little cookies, and those could be part of your crust if you wanted to. There are just so many creative ways to pretty up your pies. Now, if you were using, say you didn't want to go through this and you just wanted to put a top crust on, that's fine. Do just what we did, roll it over your filling, and then make sure that you put vents in, because the fruit that you're cooking, it's like I said, it's going to come to a boil. You've got to let that air come out. Otherwise, you're going to have a real soggy inner crust. So venting is always critical for the success of your pie. Okay. And you want to work pretty quickly. This is why I had my filling all done and ready. Now, I am going to actually, here's another little tip. I'm not going to bake my pie today. I'm actually going to get this all ready. And rather than bake it, I'm going to cover it, wrap it up, and I'm going to freeze it. And then on the day that I want to bake it, I'm going to take it out of the freezer, let it sit on my counter while my oven is heating up. And then I'm going to put that frozen pie in there and I'm going to give it that extra. I'm going to add on another 10 minutes, so maybe extra 20 minutes at the lower temperature. And that will cook up that pie and it'll be absolutely beautiful. I have done that many times before. So you can get your pie pre-made without baking it and then bring that out. Now I'm going to get my pie pan. Now we're all set with that. We've got our filling. Ooh, the fruit has already given off some liquid, so that's good.
Liz, did you put your pie filling in the refrigerator or did you leave it out on your counter?
I just left it on my counter. Okay, now I want to make sure that my strawberries are evenly mixed in there. Okay, there we go. And now we're going to take half of our strips and put them onto, oh, this didn't, I knew it. I didn't cut down far enough. So I'm gonna get my pizza cutter. That really, I should have used that from the start. Here's another little tip is using a pizza cutter will be sure, if it's nice and sharp, get these apart. I don't want to be messing around with these when it comes time to put this together. I can feel it too. They've already started to soften up. You could put these in the fridge too for a few minutes if you wanted to. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so we're going to take half of the strips and we're going to put them over our pie and let it hang off the edges. And we're going to leave a little space between them. Now, remember these little thin ones that I made here? These little thin ones, I'm going to braid. Okay, so let me make sure I get them. They're all apart. Oh, I'm not a very good braider today. There we go. Braid those. This is just a fun little extra. We got this wonderful little braid. And we're going to add that right in the middle, like that. Okay, so that'll be pretty. And I have one here that's a little on the thick side. That can go, oh, I know. This will go across because I notice on the circle here, they're getting a little bit shorter. So these on the edges, they'll go, again, try to get them towards the edges where it is shorter. And there we go. Now it's time to add our remainder. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do every other one is going to fold back on itself. Okay, every other one fold back halfway on itself. Then I'm going to lay this across Okay. And then I'm going to bring this down like that. Now I'm going to pull back the ones that I didn't do. And then lay this down. So you see, it's giving that wonderful lattice effect. A little bit more, and then pull those down. Okay, and then do it again. This one until you're finished. Super. Once you get the rhythm of it, it works out beautifully. And this was a Kate McDermott trick. So absolutely get her book. Now, this is going to be a little bit long, so I'm going to drape it, and then at the end, these extra tails will get cut off when we finish with the quilt.
Oh,
There we
we were at, somebody was asking if you could move your pie over just a little bit so they can see your,
Yeah.
how you're doing that a little better.
How's
And
that?
great, looks great to me. And can you weave your lattice on a flat cookie sheet or parchment paper and then slide it on top?
Good luck with that. I don't think that'll work because it's not sturdy. So that's a good theory, and I'm sure at some time I've done that before, but I would not recommend because again, it's not sturdy. So you're going to struggle getting that back on there. Okay. And then last piece, this goes up. And then what we're going to do is I just have an egg wash, which is an egg with a little bit of water in it. And we're going to put that on the top. There we go. And a little bit of sugar. Okay, so now we have that. I've got this extra dough. I'm still going to have a little bit more. Now it's time to cut off the little bit of drips and dregs that are over the edge. So I'm just going to leave like, leave the dough that's on top of my pie pan and just cut off these little extra guys here. And then I'm going to roll my bottom crust over the top and pinch it. And then we're going to add our egg wash and a little bit of sugar on the top there. Okay. Then we're going to roll this in. Okay. And again, you can see mine is not perfect. I'm not a pastry chef, but I think a lot of us are going to find that it doesn't look exactly like when I buy it at the grocery store. Just remember that they, first of all, do have people who are using, they're regularly cooking pies, but also they may have special machines that roll out the dough and press the dough so the dough looks perfect. And then they have crimpers that help to make it look really fancy. But we're doing it just like anybody your grandma would have done. Okay. And then you've got that little rounded edge. And then I just take my finger between my two fingers, my pointer finger between the two pointer and thumb on my other hand, and I just push one against the other, and it makes that wonderful crimp. And the crimp is to help seal the bottom crust to the top. You would do this if you were doing a regular plain crust on the top. Nothing fancy like the lattice that we've done here. There's that. This extra dough gets rolled into a ball, added to any other balls that I have in the refrigerator or freezer. and then I can use that another day. Now here is my egg wash, and that goes on top. Now, you could also put some butter in with the filling if you wanted to. I've stopped doing that just because then it's almost too buttery with the butter that's in the pie. And butter that's melted in the pie tends to look a little funky for me anyway when I go to eat it. So I just have kind of left that out. I don't think it's necessary. But you do want to get this egg wash on there, and then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of sugar on. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I do like to do that. So just do a little bit, and that will help to brown up that crust.
We do have a couple questions, Liz.
Sure.
So if you were to do a full top crust instead of the lattice crust, how many vents would you put in there?
I put at least 5. And it's just, with your knife, you can make it. Some people do really pretty vents. So you could do that. You could, when you roll out your top dough, you could take a little cookie cutter and cut out some dough those would be your vents if you wanted to. So there's a lot of ways you can do your vents.
Also,
Yep.
your egg wash, instead of using egg, could you just use water?
It will not give you that nice browned finish. I've in the past used honey, but that burns the crust, so I stopped using that. So the egg wash is good. I don't have another alternative for you because I'm sure there are people out there who can't have eggs, so that might be an issue. I'm going to cut into this. Go ahead, Francis. What else?
Are you using just plain sugar or any special sugar for the topping?
I just use plain.
And does the egg wash help to keep the crust from burning?
No, it's to help brown the crust.
Somebody said, can you use milk and water instead of egg?
Oh, that might be a good idea because the milk has a little bit of fat in it, so that would help. Okay, let's see how we did here. Okay, now I can see that there's a little bit of liquid in the bottom of here. But other than that, this pie is looking delicious. Now, of course, I'm going to have to try it to let you know what I think. I'm a big fan of strawberry rhubarb. The sugar is just fine. Perfect. And I can taste the strawberries and the rhubarb. They're cooked beautifully, and then you can see that this crust is just beautifully brown. So definitely give this a try. I have made many different types of fruit fillings. I like to combine apples with blueberries. You could do blueberries and rhubarb. You could do a berry pie. I have other pie recipes on the website for you that you can try that are more specific to the filling. So give those all a try. But I think I appreciate you sticking with me as we went over time. Thank you all for joining me. I'm looking forward to seeing you in June. The recipes are up on the website, and then we're going to take a summer break and we'll be back in September. So I hope I'll get to see you in June. Francis, were there any last minute questions before
There
we say
was.
goodbye?
Is there a difference between using metal and glass pans?
Not that I have found. Some pie bakers really have a preference, but that's definitely Kate's book covers all of that, all the different kinds of pans and what to expect from them. So I, again, always recommend that you buy her book. It's a great book for any level of a pie maker that you are.
What's your pink flower back there?
That is a tree peony. They're in bloom right now.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Liz, for today's
right.
lesson and cook-along demonstration. Boy, you made me really hungry looking at that pie.
Good,
So
good.
today's cook-along demonstration is one of many upcoming virtual event offerings provided by AARP New Hampshire. So please visit us at aarp.org/nh to learn of other virtual events, which include gentle yoga, painting classes, and educational webinars. You can also volunteer with us. So contact us at nhaarp@aarp.org. Our next class with Liz will be authentic Italian trattoria. How do you say that, Liz?
Yep,
Cooking.
you got it right. Yep. And
So
it's always
join,
the third Friday of the month.
yeah. So join us on Friday, June 20th at 2 p.m. for this fun cook-along. And you can register for this class at aarp.org/nh. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.